This story was written by Skywrites, so if you like this video, consider supporting them as well. They have an AO3 account, a Ko-fi, and a Twitter. So, leave a kudos on their story, maybe donate, give them some love. And don't forget the artist who made the cover. They are Afraid Symphony on DeviantArt and Tumblr. Links are in the description. Hello again, and welcome back to Mario is Missing. I don't really have anything else to say before we start, so let's just get right into it, shall we? Today, we are doing Chapter 6, You'll Keep Going. The clouds were armed. Rain pelted the car like liquid silver, clashing against the window with the force of 1,000 swords. It was always rainy in New Donk City, but here, the skies were angry. The heavens themselves forged watery bullets and shot them down upon any foolish enough to tread on their ground. Gutters overflowed, gushing out onto the streets. The stars were nowhere to be seen.
"Stop being dramatic, will you?"
Toadette growled, keeping her eyes firmly glued on the road.
"Yeah, it's a little slippery. We'll be fine, okay? I've won my fair share of races, you know."
Tires screeched against the pavement, begging for firm ground, anything to keep them still. Toadette responded with her hands, gripping the steering wheel with a determination I would never know. It wasn't that she was a bad driver. She was amazing. But she was nothing like Goombella. Goombella obeyed every rule, stopped at every sign, kept strictly to the speed limit. She had to. Toadette, however, she was a toad, and she knew it.
At first I felt bad driving like this with Goombella."
Toadette zipped through the streets, puddles parting like oceans at her wheels.
"She'd never be allowed to do any of this, but I knew she could. I knew Goombella could, and I knew she wanted to."
This was all well and a nice backstory, but I was feeling particularly cramped in Toadette's cart, my knees against my nose and my neck against the roof. It didn't help the way she boosted through the streets, knocking me against the door.
"But it wasn't fair to her,"
Toadette went on, just narrowly avoiding what happened to be a banana peel on the road. Litter was quite the problem in New Donk.
"So I started following the rules a little better. I started stopping at stoplights. I didn't drift. I slowed down just like everyone else."
Toadette casually loaded a mushroom into a contraption in the dash of her cart, ignoring my shrieking as we shot out into the air.
"And you know what she said to me?"
Toadette asked, as my screaming was an acceptable answer.
"She said, 'Why aren't you driving like you used to? I have to follow the rules enough as it is, you know? You actually get away with stuff. Why are you being so lame just because I'm around?'"
Toadette slammed her foot down against the metal, and the metal clanged like the clash of spears. It was unnecessary.
"So I floored it, whenever I could find an empty lot or empty streets like these out here,"
Toadette said with a grin.
"And she was happy. Maybe things weren't fair for her. Maybe it wasn't fair that I was able to do these things, but she couldn't. That at the very least, I could make her happy. You know?"
I could tell Goombella's speech pattern had rubbed off on her. I also wasn't sure what sprung her to start talking about this. Seemed she just had a fondness for her old partner. As great as friendship was, it also spoke volumes about the NDPD. Bad volumes. Volumes that'd probably be tucked away in someone's basement, only brought out to friends to say, "Look at how ridiculous this thing is." Perhaps it'd be better to tell me about Smithy? Toadette groaned.
"Ugh, Smithy. That guy's one of the original troublemakers with Bowser. He's the head of the Smithy gang."
She swerved through the lifeless streets, boosting past abandoned buildings.
"Very unoriginal name, but you'll see that he's just terrible at naming things in general."
For once, Toadette slowed to a reasonable speed. She pointed out through the windshield, beyond the closed-down structures and out into the dark heavens. Something tall stared back. It wasn't like Cacletta's tower either. This thing was alive. An enormous sword gleamed dangerously in the distance, its eyes glaring over the city, watching.
"That's Exor. Do you seriously not know this stuff?"
Toadette raised an eyebrow, or at least made the motion to do so, considering toads don't have eyebrows. I shook my head, ashamed.
Jeez, all right. Well, that giant sword out there is basically the symbol of Smithy, the center of his operations. One day, years ago, he just sort of... Toadette looked out into the storm. Fell out of the sky, sword and all, went straight into some ex-gang's factory, like, BAM! She smashed her fist into the dashboard for effect, frightening me. Stabbed the place. They say it wasn't a violent or hostile takeover, that Smithy had all the proper paperwork and he bought out that factory fair and square. But everyone knows there was more to it than that. Who was they and everyone? Certainly was a lot of them. They're always saying different things, too. Huh? Toadette blinked. Probably Goombella? She's got, books of this stuff. Apparently the X-whatevers used to be a pretty big gang. She'd know who they were. Toadette sighed. Probably used to having Goombella fill in the gaps of her lack of knowledge. Ah, so they tended to be Goombella. Got it. This made sense. Everyone knew Goombella, and she knew everyone. Anyways, Toadette continued, driving along the flooded streets at a more careful speed as the sword seemed to grow. It was staring at us. Word on the streets is that if you can see Exor, you'll go out of business. Maybe not right away, but you will. Smithy's influence has been spreading slowly but surely, devouring any business in his path for his own use. And when he wants something, he gets it. Legally, of course, as legal as a bully can be. What would he need all these buildings for? She frowned. Weapons. Just weapons. And more weapons. Smithy has a one-track mind. He spends all his time in his factory making everything. Weapons, armor, vehicles, even life. If you can call it that. You saw that thing in Kekletta's tower, didn't you? That Shy Guy thing? How could I forget? That robot had appeared so lifelike, so real, until you noticed the wires ripping out of it like guts, until you noticed the repetition of its words, or the glitches in its sound box. Yeah, there's tons of those, just tons. Smithy pretty much makes them and lets them loose into the city to do whatever they want. Luckily, they don't stray too far from him. They mostly just live with each other, and, well, them being weapons, they tend to control their own population, if you know what I mean. But still, his part of the city is only getting bigger. Toadette didn't elaborate. Her eyes were focused on the road, on the skies, and on Exor. When Smithy first showed up, him and Bowser were huge enemies, Toadette went on, driving carefully around the strange oil slick in the road. The buildings slowly transitioned from brick and cement to metal and rust. Smithy doesn't care much for anything or anyone, and Bowser doesn't like it when the spotlight is taken off of him. There were a lot of fights, but they eventually came to an agreement, thankfully, and honestly... Toadette shook her head, surprised with herself. I'm glad Bowser was here, you know? He held off Smithy's advances. He came up with the deal to slow down Smithy's work. I don't know what New Donk would look like without him. She glared at me quickly, as if I had accused her of anything. Don't get me wrong, I still hate Bowser and what he does, but there's no denying we needed his help. But that X-Gang Toadette talked about before, that sounded familiar. It must have been years ago. I know Mario talked about them. The X-Nuts? Toadette's eyes brightened. The X-Nuts! That's who they were! I wasn't on the force back then, but yeah, those guys used to cause trouble with Bowser way back when. They were all about technology and junk too. That must be why Smithy bought them out. The way she said it sounded more like a death sentence than a trade deal, but she shrugged it off. As far as I know, the X-Nauts aren't wiped out. They just went somewhere else with all the money and weapons he gave them. No idea what those guys must be up to now. She looked up into the sky briefly, the moon winking into existence above the clouds for just a moment. You know, Smithy might have even helped them get out. A guy like that could make a rocket, I bet. Toadette's lengthy exposition soon exploded into a rather abrupt end, literally. What the heck? Toadette screeched with her tires. She attempted to swerve out of the golden obstacle's way, but to our surprise, this gleaming thing moved with us. It was determined to crash. I wish just once in my miserable life I could have been a bit more stoic. After everything I've been through tonight,
From giant monsters over lava pits to demonic old witches tossing me into some void of eternal torment, you'd think that something like a car explosion wouldn't faze me. I should be better than that by now, shouldn't I? But, of course, I wasn't. I screamed and cried as our bodies shot out of the smoldering vehicle, covered in soot and tiny flames. Luckily, Toadette's head was a natural airbag. She bounced before landing on her stomach in a puddle next to me, stunned and understandably upset. My cart! I scrambled up to my feet, at least pretending I could be helpful in the slightest. Were we under attack? Had Smithy caught wind of us and decided to end us? I took what I could only assume was a menacing karate stance. I watch all of Jinx's and the Master's yoga videos, straining my eyes through the flames and rain to see our attacker.
Oh, sorry about that, old chaps.
A stuffy voice called out through the scratch of melted metal.
Was out for my nightly constitutional and seem to have stumbled upon your quaint vehicle.
The golden sphere appeared before us again from the flames. Under the fire's light it was easy to see him. A bomb. A gold one. Although, getting a better look at this fellow, his golden sheen appeared to be quite dull. The fancy hat atop his head looked like it had seen better days. Much better days. Rips, tears, explosion marks littered its once pristine make, much like its owner. Eyes wide, Toadette leaped to her dead cart's side, trying her best to keep her cool, but failing.
Wait, what? What are you doing out here? Who are you?
Her mind must have been running as fast as her cart as she finally just sputtered out a frantic,
Why?
The Babam let out another hearty chuckle, the kind that rich people do when they sip on a delicious tea or apparently blow up a car.
Oh, my dear, it's nothing to worry about, I promise you. I can pay off such trifling damages. I am Gold Bob of Gold Bobbingtons.
His mustache was wrinkled and uneven, with the left side singed almost completely off. Bad mustache hygiene is always a bad sign.
Look before you, my lads. Don't you recognize my business?
He asked, desperately jolly. When I pried my eyes away from the accident, they immediately fell onto a huge decayed building. Like its owner, its bricks were coated in gold, and like its owner, it had seen better days. Paint peeled, wood rotted, and rain pooled in stagnant puddles over the awning, looking like a boil ready to burst into tears. The windows were boarded up, the lights were off, and nobody was home. The sign read, Gold Bobbingtons.
No, my good chap, that's Gold Bobbingtons. Oh, the D seems to have fallen off. Quite an unsightly mess, that is. But I assure you, I will be having it fixed with the utmost of haste as well.
His voice cracked, like the walls of his business.
Then Sylvia will realize what a horrible mistake she made. She'll be back, and I'll take my boy, Bob, on one of those train rides he loves so much.
Toadette's anger softened. The flames of her wreckage slowly fizzled out under the pouring rain.
Oh my gosh, Mr. Bob, I'm so sorry. Was this Smithy?
Something must have clicked in her head that didn't click with me. Why wasn't she angry at this man for jumping out in front of her car anymore? Why did my gut feel like I swallowed a gold bar? Gold Bob laughed, rain positively drenching him, his wind-up key rusted to his back and barely able to turn anymore.
Why, Smithy merely offered me a deal. I simply couldn't refuse the old rapscallion. It's a shark's world out there, chaps, and I am still a shark.
He wailed.
The Gold Bobs have never made a bad monetary decision, ever. Why, it was obvious I should work with him. Why shouldn't I? No one has ever refused him.
His voice strained.
Besides, no one wanted to do business here with that ghastly sword, staring, always staring. Judge me more than my ex-wife.
He attempted to wiggle his ratty hat at the joke, but it just made me sad. Toadette moved forward, rustling through her coin purse.
I'm sorry,
she said again. This is all I have on me right now. I'll make a couple of calls and we can get you off the street and...
He spat at her hands, tossing the coins all over the empty street with a ding-ding-ding.
What in the world is this? You insult me, madam. I will not take such a paltry investment. Gold Bobbingtons is a million-coin industry, you hear me? And how dare you imply I am not well within my rights to be in front of my property?
No, sir, but...
I shall be making the calls to have you taken away!
He shouted, his rage much more real than his joy ever was.
Out of my sight, foul peasants! I don't need your pity!
Toadette sighed, defeated. Seemed to be something she was used to, as if she had seen this type of situation all too often.
Yes, sir. Well, get out of your hair. Come on, Luigi.
She turned, leaving the coins scattered before him. Did she not want them back?
Yes, keep moving, peasants. Gold Bobbingtons is not open to you.
As he walked with her back turned to him, I distinctly heard the tiny plinks of coins being picked up and put away.
And I will not forget about this cart accident. I shall have it taken care of, rest assured. I need time. I need more time. I can do this. I can...
His whimpering voice was washed away with the rain. Toadette frowned, pressing a palm against her face.
If we survive this, I'll call someone up and deal with him before he gets into more trouble. He's a nasty man, but he doesn't deserve this.
I should have given him some of my coins, too, shouldn't I? I wasn't thinking. And what about Toadette's cart?
Don't worry about it,
she replied, trying to keep herself steady.
I'll be fine. My brother was a famous explorer, you know. Almost as famous as Colorado. They even explored together sometimes. I'll be okay. It's Gold Bob I'm worried about.
Fair enough. The less to worry about, the better. The 3 gang leaders in this city were also frightening. Cacletta takes people's lives away, allegedly, but Smithy takes everything except their lives away. Life could be better used for work. Bowser was a strange mix of the two. He was both, and he was neither. Still, this didn't tell me anything I needed or wanted to know. As we walked through the miserable storm of rain, completely defenseless, completely unprepared, I couldn't help but think to myself what it was all for again. Exor stared evermore. It did not look angry, merely amused, as if watching the story of ants unfold. Oh, I just remembered. We sort of left a burning cart out in the middle of the road. Was that okay? Toadette turned to me, shocked.
Huh? Is that something we really need to worry about right now?
If she wasn't drenched in rain, I would have sworn she was sweating.
The streets are practically unused out here. I'm sure giving Gold Bob something constructive to do is for the best. Plus, it'd be pretty dull if we dealt with that kind of thing right now. Wouldn't it?
Her eyes burned holes into mine, demanding I drop it. Again, I am not one to refuse an order. Consider it forgotten. The roads ahead were damp and miserable. I've walked through the rain before, but not like this. The rain howled with power, and the water soaked through my overalls and into my bones. At the very least, I reckon this must be what a blooper felt like. No wonder they're so grumpy. Toadette kept to herself. Her eyes roamed through the rusty streets, but they didn't see much. Didn't seem like she really wanted to see. Despite the storm, despite the heavenly rage of lightning and thunder, the silence seeped under my skull. Nobody was here. The weight of all that nothing, of all that nobody, pressed down on me like a sledgehammer. Signs of construction appeared. Old metallic plates drilled into the musty bricks. Seemed metal was the only resource Smithy and his gang liked using. It was plastered everywhere. Even the streets slowly turned to rusty metal plates. Maybe it was good we weren't driving here. I had a difficult time keeping my footing on this sleek metal ground. This place, it was otherworldly. Were we still truly in New Donk City? Even the skies roiled with an unnatural blue that didn't make any sense. Little Bean Bean Town felt foreign, sure, but at least felt like a place that belonged in our world. Here, though, I felt wrong. My own heart pounding in my chest wasn't right. Not here. It wasn't normal.
blood and guts and organs. These things did not make sense in Smithy's territory. There was no place for squishy little bags of flesh like me. Exor's eyes followed, growing ever more threatening as we moved closer. Something bounced in the distance. A noise. A sign of life. Or some kind of life, at least. I strained my eyeballs against the assault of the rain, and in the distance, I could see them. The lights tied around their heads made it all the easier to make them out, even in this foggy downpour. Toads? Toadette stopped in her tracks, frozen. Why? Sure, it was strange to see toads here, but they were familiar faces. Safe faces. I scrambled over to them, hoping that maybe, just maybe, things could be easier here. Maybe they'd know where Mario went. Luigi, wait! Toadette whimpered, barely heard over the clashing of rain against metal. The toads stared quietly as I approached, eyes following my every movement. Exor mimicked their gaze. My legs slowed to a crawl. They were speckled with gray rather than the usual rainbow of color, but at least they wore the usual red vests. So very red against the gray. Maybe they were just old? I saw some strange black marks at the back of their heads, like maybe mold of some kind. They were fungus people, after all.
What business do you have?
The toad rasped, his body practically grasping for air at the final word.
Here.
I let them know I was looking for my brother, Mario, and, I guess the crown, too. That part usually slipped my mind. It wasn't really very important in the long run, was it? But I suppose it did help me get out of the house.
Stop talking!
The toad gasped, glaring spears my way.
We don't know of any Mario. A crown, however. Yes, that medal we have seen. Delivered to Smithy. Very well delivered, if I do say so myself.
A strange wave of smugness contorted the toad's face. Huh? They knew about the crown, but these guys didn't know Mario? The famous detective? Sometimes so good at solving crimes, they called him Super? Not to mention he could stand toe-to-toe with a giant monstrous turtle? He's impossible to not know. Rain splashed down against the mushroom heads, running down their eyes and cheeks, but they didn't notice.
Enough. It is dangerous for...
He struggled with the word again.
People such as you two. It is best you return to our fellow toads, where it is safe, warm.
I felt Toadette's pigtails next to me. She must have shown up, but she didn't say a word. She just stared and stared and stared. Honestly, she stared more than Exor, more than these toads. She was almost creepier than them. Almost. The gray toads, while unbothered by the rain, still appeared to be bothered by something. Their bodies were always moving. Just some part of them seemed to twitch here and there. An arm, a leg. They couldn't keep still. One even paced back and forth, but kept his eyes firmly planted on me. They both had cute little matching backpacks, even. Probably rations and supplies to keep watch here, although they didn't look very heavy. Well then, if they didn't know anything, then that was a shame, but we would have to be going through anyway, even if it was dangerous. I appreciated their concern for our safety. It was nice to think that something other than Exor was watching our backs.
Yes, you may go.
The toad rasped, eyes and bodies following us as we scrolled by. They were very good at their jobs. Couldn't even tell if they were breathing.
We will be watching.
I thanked them for their wonderful service as guards, calling along a pale toadette to follow me. Even as we gained a few blocks away from those toads, I could swear they were still staring at us. How thoughtful. But for some reason, Toadette didn't appear well. Had she caught a cold? Was she okay?
Luigi?
Toadette whimpered out, staring at the rusted metal beneath us.
Those... The words hung at her lips, choking her. Toads are always good. Why would she be so afraid of them? Even compared to Kekletta's tower, I had never seen her so scared. She wringed her hands together as if she was trying to wash them. Sharp, tiny breaths left her. She heaved. She gasped. She appeared to be drowning in it all. That was my brother.
Ayo! Thank you so much for the short chapter. This is, 30 minutes for all this audio? Hey, this is going to go super quick. Thank you so much. And all of the re-recording I'm going to have to do, particularly for those, metal toads, I think I'm going to switch that up a bit. Yeah. All right, that was fun. Very neat. Quite epic. Yeah. Have a nice day, I guess, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye. Ciao.